Hey, ho ho, let's go. Yeah, that was bad. That was a bad intro. I'm so sorry. But we are going to be talking about some punk rock related stuff in this video. But first, I'm just going to say right now, in case you are unaware and are curious, I'm playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 4. This is the remake. Yes, mods are on. This game is awesome. And no, not all of my videos going forward are going to be effortless gameplay videos while I talk over them. No, this is just because I want to get this out pretty much immediately, as soon as I can. I promise you, I am definitely working on some much more ambitious projects for the long term here, and you're just gonna have to stay tuned for those. I'm making this video primarily because punk rock matters to me. I'm a punk musician. I do care about what happens in the punk community, and I mean, I've done videos about punk rock and punk rock history. You should go check those out when you get a chance, but for now, let's talk about Green Day. I'm not a fan of Green Day. Like, sure, there's a handful of songs that I think are pretty okay, but for the most part, you're not gonna really catch me, like, putting Green Day within my rotation. I'm more into, like, bands like the Distillers, the Suicide Machines, Propaganda, Operation Ivy. I like ska punk bands, and I like bands that are a bit heavier, but I also like bands that are underground. And you're mostly going to find a bunch of nerds that have never really stepped into Hot Topic going to these shows. I don't have as much vitriolic hatred of Green Day as some other people might, but I do understand why some people would be put off by Green Day basically selling out, going mainstream, and kind of like being completely disconnected from, their roots. So I just want to be clear that there is some valid criticism to be made about Green Day, but I don't necessarily think in this story that we're telling here, Green Day is at fault or is wrong necessarily. Let's take a few steps back. In September of 2004, the band Green Day came out with the album American Idiot. I was in middle school when this album came out. Given that I was still kind of getting into music in general at the time, I did listen to it and I liked it for what it was. I would eventually go on to like other bands like The Clash, who were just like a million times better than Green Day in my opinion, but still, like, I consider Green Day at least a stepping stone, no pun intended for those Minor Threat fans, to me entering into the world of punk rock. Like, just like a first step into trying to learn like what these bands are, kind of like stepping out of my comfort zone and being able to like, try to see like who else is making music that's just like this, maybe even better, arguably even better. But I want to talk about the title track on the album American Idiot. You see, in 2009, there was an article written in a Viva la Revolution magazine issue where Billie Joe Armstrong came out about his feelings about a specific Lynyrd Skynyrd song. The song in question is called That's How I Like It. Upon reading the lyrics myself, I can observe that there's a lot of just references to like, I like my women high and my beer cold, my car is fast and my whiskey old, and I got my American flag, it makes me proud, and all that shit. It's really just like by the numbers. So I can understand why Billie Joe Armstrong would take issue with that song just at a very basic level, which is why he went on to write the lyric in the song American Idiot, where it goes, I'm not a part of the redneck agenda. I do think it is necessary to mention that redneck is kind of an insult that I don't think aged very well, considering that a lot of people who do identify as rednecks are not necessarily right-wing Republican MAGA fuckwads who just want to just install a fascist dictatorship. A lot of these people are either just from the South and live the redneck lifestyle, whether or not they're left or right-leaning, or they are people who have been completely disenfranchised by the establishment, regardless of the administration that is in office, Republican or Democrat for that matter. So, speaking for myself, within the last 10 years, I have made an effort to stop using redneck as an insult because I just feel like it is pretty class reductionist, but I digress, that's just a side tangent. I do understand what Billie Joe Armstrong is saying, especially considering that when that song came out, it was at the peak of the war on terror that was going on. You know, you had the United States invading Iraq and pretty much all of the Middle East, terrorizing civilians over there for 20 years, and what did we get out of it? I mean, not really anything. We didn't win anything with that war. We didn't win shit. Okay, you know what? I stand corrected. Halliburton won from that war. Again, I digress. Because just at a very basic and surface level, we can all agree that the message behind American Idiot is just discontent with the status quo. That's really all it is. Without digging too deep into it, that's really what the song is about, right? Things are bad, it's bad, it's bad. That's really what it is. And I mean, I don't think we can really disagree with that there. It's bad. And I mean, it got worse. And as it got worse, of course, Billie Joe Armstrong would develop a legacy with that song. You know, it would be synonymous with his whole image. So, of course, they would continue to play this song over time. And of course, every once in a while, any musician would, including myself, which I'll get to later, you are going to want to change the lyrics occasionally, keep it fresh. Because while American Idiot was about the war on terror specifically, or at least the era in which the war on terror inhabited from, having discontent with the status quo in and of itself is a timeless feeling. Plus, changing the lyrics every once in a while, it keeps things interesting. It makes for more memorable moments and value to the song. It gives songs new life. Just like remaking a video game from the 90s, it gives it new life, and it makes us remember why it was so good to begin with. So in Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve with Ryan Seacrest, Billie Joe Armstrong did a live performance with American Idiot again, of course he was going to, and he eventually came across that original line and changed it up, but instead of saying redneck agenda, he said MAGA agenda. I'm not a part of the MAGA agenda. This is really interesting because a lot of people kind of lost their shit, mainly Trump supporters. To be fair, a lot of the response that they got was just people saying that Green Day haven't been good for years and that they kind of weren't really punk to begin with. They're just a bunch of sellouts, and that's a fair criticism. I'm not gonna debunk that at all. That's not really a point to debunk to begin with. Not to mention, it's a purely subjective opinion, and it's a valid one if you don't like Green Day for whatever reason. However, what I did see was a lot of people saying that you shouldn't put politics inside of your music. To which, if that's your criticism, especially of Green Day, of all people, you're kinda late to the party. Literally 20 years too late to the party. I do plan to make another video sometime in the distant future about politics in music and in art, because I feel like that is such a really deeply rooted issue that a lot of people tend to brush off, especially considering that art and music is all about expression. I just find the assertion that politics can't be in art and music to be a very laughable and very outsider perspective of what art and music truly is. And I'm saying that as somebody who does make music and has been doing so for 20 years. I just think that's ridiculous. But that's another conversation for another time. What I am going to do is pivot to the focus of this video, and that is the response of a particular person that was on Twitter, particularly the owner of Twitter. You know where this is going. So Elon Musk tweets, Green Day goes from raging against the machine to milquetoastedly raging for it. And to be clear, that is a direct quote. That is not a paraphrasing of what Elon Musk said. Immediately, I'm just gonna say right now, Donald Trump was the US president and currently is the US president. And I think that's fair to say he is the machine, right? Not to mention, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's the top of the fucking ruling class. And I think we can obviously just draw to this conclusion that Elon Musk is ridiculous and stupid and dumb for even having this take to begin with, it is much more important to analyze where he is coming from, because let's face it, Elon Musk went full MAGA. Like, not even just full MAGA, he donated to Donald Trump's entire campaign and pretty much bought the whole country, bought democracy, bought the election. It's one thing for the literal top of the ruling class to look at Billie Joe Armstrong and his use of the word MAGA in this context and just be like, yeah, he's just like simping for the machine. The lack of self-awareness there is truly impeccable. But with the benefit of hindsight, we now know why he had this stance to begin with, because his wallet was in the MAGA agenda. No wonder he attacked Billie Joe Armstrong. No fucking wonder. So let's take a quick pause, because there is some relevant context to give here. There's an article that was written by Ken Klippenstein that I want to share, and I'll put a link in the description, because it's a really well-written article, and the sources are literally the World Bank and US intelligence. So I think that's pretty good to start with, especially if we're talking about the horse's mouth here. And before some goober says it in the comment section, no, I'm not saying that using the World Bank and the US intelligence is a thing that we should be supporting. It's mostly just to say that even they are admitting that this is a problem, right? So the article is called Big Brother Becomes Little Brother. And I find this article to be quite compelling because it is making the case that nation states as we know it, like the United States, South Korea, Canada, all of the big hegemonic states, they are now being rivaled by private corporations, meaning that private corporations have enough capital to be able to rival actual nation states and to actually have much more influence on society as a whole than even whole governments. In this article, there's a graph that shows Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, and Tesla, so on and so forth, with their market cap versus the United States, China, Japan, Germany, United Kingdom, Italy, Canada, South Korea, so on and so forth, with their GDP. And of course, all of the nation states are going to be much higher than the corporations at this point, but the gap between those two entities are very, very narrow. And I mean, it's to a point to where some of these corporations are actually higher than these nation states. For example, Tesla, with a market cap of $1.3 trillion. And that is nearly rivaling South Korea's $1.8 trillion. Of course, the United States is at a whopping $25.46 trillion, as the United States is hegemonically the most powerful nation in the world. But just keep in mind that when we're talking about the opinions of Elon Musk and his thoughts on, say, Green Day, say what you want about Billie Joe Armstrong and Green Day, but of course, Billie Joe Armstrong's net worth is $75 million, which is a lot. And obviously, he's probably gonna be not in any mosh pits anytime soon. You can probably expect to see him in like a Floyd's barber shop instead of like your local barber shop. But we're talking about that versus Elon Musk with a whopping $412.9 billion of net worth, spending $277 million to help Donald Trump win the US election. So it's just ludicrous for Elon Musk to say that Green Day is defending or simping for the machine when Elon Musk bought the machine. I mean, he bought Twitter, the biggest social media site in the world. I never liked Twitter even before Elon Musk purchased it, but Twitter is one of those places where you tend to get your news, more so than actual media or independent journalism. It's the biggest communication platform in the world. Elon Musk is like literally a monopolistic fuckwad whose daddy literally owns slaves in apartheid South Africa, of all fucking places. So yeah, real punk legend Elon Musk, of all fucking people, the literal top of the ruling class. You know, the boot itself. So fast forward in time, basically a year, and Green Day play another show where they play the song American Idiot, but this time they play the show in South Africa to where they change the lyrics to "I'm not a part of the Elon agenda." And the MAGA people just queefed all over their keyboards about it again. I just think that if you are making me give Billie Joe Armstrong punk cred, you're doing something wrong. Because I don't like Green Day or Billie Joe Armstrong. And if I'm here making a video saying that Billie Joe Armstrong is right about something, especially if it's a criticism of you, then I don't think you can be punk. Saying that Billie Joe Armstrong has a biting criticism of Elon Musk is like saying that a child could do it when asking, why are you having difficulty doing this thing? So as of right now, I am not seeing Elon making a response to this gesture, but it is kind of funny how just all of this came in full circle. But I think that Elon Musk just might be too busy giving Sieg Heil salutes to address what Green Day said in Johannesburg. And y'all, yes, that was a Sieg Heil salute. I'm not fucking stupid, okay? I've been on this planet for 33 years. I know about neo-Nazi dog whistles and Schrodinger's douchebag and Godwin's law. Come on, guys. I'm not a fucking idiot. He did a Nazi salute, okay? Let's not argue with that. He did a Nazi salute. Even if he didn't mean to, he did a Nazi salute. And calling it a Roman salute doesn't make it better either. Unless you want to, defend the literal empire that lynched Jesus Christ. And I'm not a Christian, by the way. So let's get to the bottom line of why I'm even making this video. Why am I even talking about all of this? Because I know out there that there are people who call themselves punk and are on the front line to defend this stupid fucking billionaire who is on his way to become a trillionaire. The world's first one. I just don't think that you can call yourself punk and defend the literal richest person in the world, or defend the literal most powerful person in the world, who owns a company whose market caps rivals that of some of the more hegemonic and fascist countries in our world. I mean, you're not gonna catch Elon Musk in a mosh pit. Hell, you're not gonna find Donald Trump in a mosh pit either. Yet there are punks out there, or at least people who call themselves punk, that defend Donald Trump. One of those people is Johnny Rotten, the singer of the Sex Pistols. There's also Michael Graves as well. These are people whose cred in the scene are that of either, legacy or aesthetic. Now, I want to back up a second here and kind of talk about what does it mean to even be a punk, right? Because a lot of people who get into punk music are usually those who have been disenfranchised by the system. And when I say the system, I am using an overarching umbrella term to kind of mean the nation state, the status quo, the school system, the police state, religion, so on and so forth. Most of the people who are in the punk scene have been at some point disenfranchised, oppressed, marginalized in some way. And that's to say that not everybody has the same experience in the punk scene, but most people who are in the punk scene at least can empathize with those who are struggling in the system in which we live under. You're rarely, if not ever, going to go to a show where it's full of punks who are rich as fuck. And I mean, sure, those do exist. There are punks with a billion fucking patches and they live in their mom's basement with a trust fund that can pretty much secure them for the rest of their lives. Yeah, that definitely does exist, but there's a difference between being financially okay versus the literal fucking top of the ruling class. It's one thing to be a part of the ruling class, it's another thing to be the top of the ruling class. And think about what that means to be a member of the ruling class, let alone the top of the ruling class. That means if you were to call the police are actually going to respond instead of you getting sexually assaulted and then the police will just say, all right, we'll work on it. We'll let you know if we see anything. And, just last year, I did a video talking about how, like, Brian Thompson was killed by Luigi Mangione, but Luigi Mangione was put on trial, whereas Jordan Neely, who was killed while he was going through a mental health crisis while homeless, his killer got off scot-free. It means that you get to live a life that was literally handed to you, literally through systemic violence and coercion. So, to defend Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and to call yourself a punk in any metric is like an act of treason. That's worse than being a Nazi punk. Although, we've already talked about the salute earlier in this video. Now, I want to also talk about something else. This is not necessarily the most relevant to this video, but I just want to talk about it just because I find it more funny than it is a criticism. But Elon Musk being referenced in American Idiot is kind of funny, but I also have changed my lyrics of older songs that I have written to eventually, be up to date with current events and so on and so forth. So for those who have been following me for a long time, like more than a decade, you know that I have a song that I have had multiple, bands and projects perform called When Marx Was a Boy, meaning Karl Marx, when Karl Marx was a boy. And it was supposed to be a song to kind of give perspective as to why somebody would want to be a communist in the first place. Why would somebody ever want to be a communist in the first place? Well, if you're a communist, then that means you defend the working class. You defend people who are struggling to put food on the table. And that you want to see that class disparity be completely abolished. The withering away of the state into a moneyless, classless society, where the wealthy few oligarchical fucking plutocrats in office aren't going to fucking push you around, legislatively speaking. And I just didn't like how Red Scare tactics were misrepresenting that, even if you have criticisms of Karl Marx, right? Now, as time went on, I would expand the song. I would make it a little bit longer as years went on, like add a verse or two, or add a whole section of the song. At one point, I added the lyric that went, Mitchell's in his seat, counting all his wealth, sucking us like leeches, robbing us of all our health, referencing Mitch McConnell. But eventually, I went on to record the song for Turf Dump, and I changed Mitchell to Elon. So this is to say that even though Green Day is very wealthy themselves, we all have far more in common with each other as punks than we do with Elon Musk. Never forget about that. Thank you.